Welcome to the 6th episode of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast, and a happy new year to you all. For this one, we've got the whole crew together. Me, Alan Walker, Toby Culshaw, Alison, Ettridge and Nick Brooks, co-hosting an episode we recorded just before Christmas for release now in early January. If we seem confused about what time of year it is, that's why. Much less confused and full of incredible insight into his team's unique, groundbreaking approach to talent intelligence was our guest, Vibhu Ganesan of Intel. Have fun! Before we get on with the main event, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast is proudly sponsored by our friends at Stratagens, and here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you a little bit more about them.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's STRATIGENS.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.
Hello. I'm Alan Walker, and welcome to episode 6 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. Now, just a quick note, we are recording this in December. You'll be probably listening to this in either January or February. So we're going to wish you Merry Christmas, because we're not bright enough to actually stick to the pretense that it's the new year, and a Happy New Year in both advance and behind. So there we go. I'm delighted as ever to be joined by Nick Brooks of Microsoft, Alison Ettridge of Talent Intuition, and of course the legend that was Toby Culshaw, now little old Amazon. So I think we've done enough episodes now to skip the detailed intros, and I'm told by our listeners that a lot of them are fast forwarding past that bit anyway and getting to the nitty gritty. So why don't I simply say to all of you, how are you, co-hosts?
I'm doing great.
I'm doing great, but I do want to know how Nick and I get to legend status. Bit upset about that, if I'm honest.
You have to send me gifts. That's it, simple as that. I bought. I don't need anything else. You can buy my affection.
Well, you have the same incriminating photos I have. That's...
Let me just remind you all, we are recording.
Either bribery or blackmail, one of the two, Alison, whichever's easier. So, of course, we also have with us our guest, Vibhu Ganesan. Hi, Vibhu. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'm happy to be here. And
we're very happy to have you as well, my friend. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Sure. I'm Vibhu Ganesan. I'm a part of the People Analytics team at Intel. My role within the team is that of Enterprise Talent Intelligence Lead. Sounds a bit complicated, but it's doing things like building our team's talent intelligence infrastructure, making sure that we have the right relationships with our vendors, and then working on talent intelligence projects that are that have an enterprise-wide scope. So these are the typical type of things, not very different from some of our previous guests, but we do it slightly differently at Intel, and that's what I'm looking forward to talk more about.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to finding out more as well. Have you steeled yourself and prepared yourself for the hard-hitting questions from Alison and Nick?
Absolutely not. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I guess.
We hope so. I'm sure it will be. We've had some great guests so far, as you said, and we're really delighted to have you here. So I think many listeners now will be familiar with the format of the show. In just a sec, Toby's going to lead us through a discussion of some of the more interesting happenings in the world of talent intelligence, news, views, industry insights, and all that jazz. And then Alison and Nick are going to team up on Vibhu and fire questions at him about his career and views on talent intelligence and his life at Intel. So why don't we crack on? Toby, what's happening in the world of TI? Anything cool, insightful, interesting? What's happening?
I couldn't possibly comment upon the cool, but insightful, interesting for sure. So there's been a few bits that I've picked up on recently, a couple of it more around funding, a couple of bits around kind of platformy side. Well, the first bit that I really thought was quite interesting, though, was an article in Forbes about how the power of video will change talent intelligence. And it's a broader scope of talent intelligence than a lot of us would define. but it's looking at how you can use video interviewing and how that's going to change how we look at the TA process. So it could be looking at candidate performance, but you could be looking at hiring manager performance, assessment for bias, using those interviews from a competitive intelligence perspective as well. So lots of really interesting stuff within there. I think videos are a really fascinating area for talent intelligence, and the interview process is a fascinating one. It's so hard to get at scale, so hard to nail down, and so hard to actually make it work without having a huge amount of effort and time resource for the return investment. But the potential for it is massive. If you think about how much time we spend interviewing candidates, the sheer armies of recruiters out there compared to the size of the talent intelligence teams out there, I think the potential here is huge. But it's obviously one that's equally quite contentious. You got lots of GDPR type stuff going on and actual approvals, etc. So I think it's quite a contentious one, but some really interesting, thought-provoking points in there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on the sort of potential that this could have, Toby. And this is one of those things that COVID seems to have changed, right? I'm also thinking about the more immediate sort of use cases that we can take from here, compared to what would be more long term and what we don't have capabilities currently to kind of leverage. So I'm talking about you can do one of two things. You can do get value out of this by storing the videos for making the organization's memory of a candidate better, or you can process the content of this video and infer things from it, right? So I think there are a lot of immediate applications that we can do by storing these videos for later, right? You have two candidates that you interview for a specific role. One is a silver medal candidate, really good, and the other is your hire. You can have you enhance your organization's memory of this silver medal candidate by just simply storing that video and having it available for you to look at it maybe 4 months down the line, right? I think that's where I see a lot of immediate potential. And then when we get really good at video analytics, that's it just opens up a whole bunch of opportunities for us. What do you think? Where are the other teams in terms of capabilities to do video analytics?
I guess beyond the video itself and the analytics around the video, I guess there's also the ability to transcribe the audio from that and make it super searchable, isn't it, as well, in terms of being able to quickly look for keywords, phrases, how often people, I think, reference particular things, but also sentiment behind how they talk about stuff as well, positive, negative, etc. So there's huge potential without a doubt. I think we just need to be really careful that it's done properly. I think Toby alludes to the fact that there's still the potential for huge amounts of bias around video, particularly when you're comparing two individuals where one may be super confident in that kind of situation, somebody else may be very nervous or uncomfortable. And the things like, I'm not going to name platforms, but platforms that look at facial tics and expressions and things like that. Some of the science behind that stuff is still, it's not been completely proven, I don't think, by some of those vendors. So it's an interesting space, and I think it will improve massively.
I'll tell you what, something is quite cool though in that area, and if I always look through the lens of big data and kind of aggregating data up. If there was a way of taking the video content and somehow anonymizing it, and then and kind of building that up into a big picture, what you're doing is you're taking the competitive intelligence data that normally sits with one recruiter and kind of scaling it, because you're getting it across all recruiters. And that becomes pretty cool if it's anonymized in some way, shape or form. And you're right, that might be just looking at the script of the video. It doesn't need the kind of the visual as well. But that would be a really good way of looking at aggregation of data from the
That's
recruiters.
a real long-term problem forever, hasn't it been, that talent intelligence piece, the competitive intelligence piece, and the challenges that come from trying to get a process in place where everybody flows that information up to somewhere central. It just doesn't happen in a lot of organizations. So doing it through video could be a really cool way of attacking it.
Exactly. And if you look at the underlying theme, it's there's a lot of vendors trying to tackle the problem of how do we make human interactions quantifiable. And Alan, you touched on it as well, the language, the sentiment, all those different signals. And I've seen a few vendors in this space who look at the interview process, and obviously their value proposition is how do we mitigate and reduce bias. So looking at the language, the intent, and it's for organizations to self-reflect and say, how are our hiring managers conducting these types of interviews? Are they doing it equitably? Are they doing it with true, diverse, and inclusive values throughout? And it's actually putting these interactions into very much big data. So you can start to analyze the themes, to your point, Alison, across organizations. So I think there's where it gets really sticky is if you start to look at selection type criteria. That's where obviously the compliance and the real risks come in. But if you think about it as the opportunity to improve experiences across the board, I think that's unprecedented.
Yeah, really exciting.
And what do we think about the value or the difference between asynchronous video, so the pre-recorded questions and the respondee records their answer, versus using video that can still be transcribed and still be recorded, but it's still a one-to-one conversation between recruiters and candidates? Is there a different place for those two different things, or is one better than the other?
Blimey, you said you weren't going to ask any intelligent questions in this bit.
Here he is. He's back.
Toby.
I think it's it's horses for course. I don't think I'm the right person to answer. I'm not an assessment guru, but I think for me personally, the one-to-one relationship piece is going to draw out a more natural response. I think the pre-recorded piece, in some areas, it's going to be better because people can re-record and look at how they've performed, change, edit, come back again for a better version of themselves, as it were, in inverted commas. And you might get a more authentic self on the one-to-one. But equally, you could flip that around and say, well, within the one-to-one environment, people may be more nervous because they're facing off to somebody else. And in the pre-recorded, they can be a more true version of themselves. So, yeah, I will leave that to the assessment gurus, but I'm not sure. But I think there probably is a different use case for each.
I think that's fair, definitely. So what else is happening, Toby?
Quite a lot within the world of HCM, ATS, CRM type stuff. A lot of platforms that are in that space and use the phrase talent intelligence, they use it in a different way to how I would naturally look at talent intelligence, but they use it nonetheless, and they're doing some very interesting stuff within their various platforms. So Eightfold, eightfold.ai, I believe, is just got its unicorn tag with $125 million in its Series D funding. So really, really interesting HCM platform. As I say, I don't know if I'd class it as talent intelligence in the way I would use talent intelligence. I'd see them more as an augmented HCM platform or augmented sourcing platform, etc. But looks like a fantastic platform. I have no affiliation, don't know them, but it looks like a great platform nonetheless. We've also seen a big move by, I'm probably getting the name wrong, Sensia, who have just announced they've got a new person joining Burgess Korea, who's a former CTO over at Enterprise over at Intel, and he's joined the startup. Once again, they refer to themselves as a talent intelligence platform with recruiting and workforce management within there. For me, it's more like an augmented sourcing platform, very much on that CRM ATS side of things in my mind. But the move itself, having somebody of Burgess's level coming in to an organisation that's only 3 years old, that to me, and equally with the Eightfold funding, is really showing that there's a lot of money going into this space at the moment. Clearly, talent intelligence as a phrase is getting a lot of attention from the people with the big wallets in life. So yeah, it's definitely some interesting evolutions going on in that whole CRM, ATS, HCM platform space.
It's definitely interesting. I think to your point about the use of talent intelligence, sometimes I think they've got those two words the wrong way round, and they should be saying it's an intelligent talent platform rather than a talent intelligence platform. Because actually, there's some super good stuff out. There's some super good products out there at the moment. Eightfold. I met with the CEO of Eightfold 2.5, nearly 3 years ago, when they were, I think, 20 employees. And then it looked impressive. I remember them showing them, and again, no affiliation with Eightfold at all. And I remember seeing the first rumblings of it coming into the UK and Europe, and people saying, have you heard of this? Has anybody heard of that? Now they're the darling of the industry. Everybody knows about Eightfold, it seems, and everybody talks about them. And they're picking up some pretty meaty clients left, right, and centre. And I'm not, although 125 million for a piece of HR technology is an awful lot of money, I'm not surprised when you've seen some of the money that's being thrown around for products that are much narrower, actually, in terms of their scope, their ability, their features, etc. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that goes.
Well, that's it, Alan. What their value proposition is interesting because they look at the signals that you get from pre-hire all the way through to that individual becoming an employee. And that's kind of the talent intelligent component. What are the skills? What is the prior experience those individuals brought in? And then how do they become successful and how do they move kind of sideways, up, down across your organization? And it's really just building that holistic picture of the candidate journey. So it's kind of this, I guess, intelligence layer that sits on top of existing HCM and HRIS systems. But what will be interesting to watch is I think their play is to become the single solution and become the ATS, the CRM, plus the intelligence layer, the talent management capabilities. But at the moment, they're working really hard to develop all of the integrations as to how do they get into organizations. But if you have a look at their site, there's not many HR scenarios they don't claim to cover. I'm not sure the maturity of each yet, but it's pretty comprehensive and it sure is exciting to watch.
And just to be clear, although me and Nick probably coming across as fanboys here a little bit, this podcast is not sponsored by Eightfold. It's sponsored by the wonderful people at Stratagens.
Oh, bless you. Do you know what, though? It's really interesting listening to it because I think they're a really cool business. But I think there's I don't know whether the word danger is the right word or not, but there's a danger in here that everything that I think Toby and I believe in, which is about taking talent intelligence to the business to make it more strategic, I think the phrase becomes much more associated with talent acquisition, candidate journeys, getting bums on seats. And it feels to me like those two things are a dichotomy. And we kind of come back to this whole thing about, okay, well, if that is what talent intelligence is, which makes perfect sense, they're a cool business, it's adding a really cool intelligence layer to the candidate journey, then what is using the insight in a different way to inform a business decision? Because the two things are very different, I think.
Absolutely.
And you know what as well, Alison, the limitation is you've only got the intelligence of individuals who are within your ecosystem, right?
Exactly.
So are known to you as an organization. What about the world at large beyond? And that's kind of the space that we play in, I guess, is being able to understand the broader landscape and the effects.
Yeah. And that's not being a non-fan. That's just going, actually, I think it's quite interesting. Sorry, Vibhu.
Sorry, Alison. And I was just about to say that it's also about how we use the word intelligence, right? From my context within Intel, we use talent intelligence more akin to the way we use intelligence within the word competitive intelligence, right? What do we know about our competitors? What do we know about our markets and the way that they're moving, right? And then there is another way you can use the word intelligence, which is in the sense of smartness or the ability to connect different dots and come up with a specific picture, right? So I think some companies approach it, or some companies use the word talent intelligence in the context of here is what we know about the markets or the set of competitors that operate in this market, and other companies use it as what can we how can we use all the information that we have about a set of candidates to build a better profile, a more comprehensive profile of them, right? So and that's where it gets really very interesting, because all of us have a slightly different view of where in the spectrum of definitions for talent intelligence our definition of talent intelligence is.
And on that point, do you think that something we've debated here often is where talent intelligence will go, where it should sit, what the remit is, etc. And the obvious one that people compare with frequently is people analytics, and should they be in the same house? Could this be a case that the evolution of the tech platforms will drive how TI teams are structured, because if I look at these moves and they're having cradle to the grave tech within one platform, all the data analytics is within one platform. By its nature, it would suggest a drive towards having people analytics, talent intelligence within one team. I know that's not necessarily how a lot of people think, and that they're thinking talent intelligence, myself included, within a centralized intelligence function or analytics function, for example. But do we think the tech here could actually drive the org design of TI teams out there?
Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm with you. I think that we'll end up with central intelligence teams, which has kind of sales analytics, customer analytics, candidate analytics, talent analytics, market analytics, competitor analytics, all in one place. Yeah, we waffle on about joining the dots all the time. I should stand by that and say, actually, you need to be joining the dots, across all of your insight lens.
Yeah, it's joining the dots from the output of each of those intelligence teams either. It's also joining the dots in terms of sharing approaches and skills and methodology and tech to a certain degree about how you go out and get that intelligence.
Absolutely. And I think here is, I completely agree with what you just said, which is there's a lot to learn from these competitive intelligence teams and the way they approach certain problems. We know that our product market research teams focus heavily on things like market share, right? But because we work with such thin slices of the market, as if we have a specific labor market, we only usually have a thin market share there. So we don't necessarily think about it from the perspective of market share. And maybe that's not a concept that we can pick up from a competitive intelligence team and apply for talent intelligence. But if we take, for instance, on the other hand, the win-loss analysis and that type of things that people do within the product market research world, you can apply something very similar within the talent intelligence world. So I think there's a lot to learn from other competitive intelligence organizations, but the unique potential of what talent intelligence teams can bring, I think, is best realized when they are a part of a people analytics team. The reason I say this is, let's say a business comes in with a problem like, hey, we have a lot of attrition in Spain. What's going on there, right? Having the ability to look at both internal metrics, internal HR metrics like workforce composition, turnover, employee experience survey results, manager development survey results, and then being able to layer all of that internal information from the people analytics world with the external data around what are the sort of talent demand pressures that we're facing in that market, what is the employer brand strength that we have, and what is the sort of competitive pressure that we're facing in these markets. Being able to put all of these factors together, that sort of potential is best realized if talent intelligence kind of sits within people analytics, right? So I think there's a lot to learn from the centralized competitive intelligence teams, but the sort of unique potential can be realized better if we are in people analytics.
Yeah, I would agree, Vibhu. It's a very necessary convergence, and the way that we talk about it is know the business, know the market, right? So you need that deep enough kind of business understanding to know which solutions you're going to develop, and then obviously have that backed by your intelligence and understanding of the landscape. So it has to be that holistic picture. And I think, Toby, to your point, we do see that these functions are very separate today, although we partner pretty deeply. And but it will be interesting from a data perspective as that starts to converge. Does that force the teams together to work in the same rhythm more and actually become part of the same function? And when we talk about the business competitive intelligence teams, we do a lot of work with different centers of excellence. And what we often find is they lean on us for our knowledge and understanding of skills, or the skills economy at large, to infer signals on the competition. So talent movement preceding market movement. So we kind of lean on them for the understanding of what are the business products, service priorities, etc., so that we can obviously align our talent strategies to that. So I think it's definitely an exciting proposition. And if it's maybe technology that brings us together more, that can only be a good thing.
I'd agree, but I being slight devil's advocate, I see that as the example we just used from Vibhu. I don't necessarily see that as a case for TI and people analytics to merge, but I think it's a case that arguably people analytics shouldn't be within HR either. And the reason I say that is if you use that example about we've got high attrition rate in this location, we need to look into why. That for me, that's not actually the business problem. The business problem is we need to make X million or X trillion, or we need to have X market share. Mm-hmm. This attrition rate is affecting our business. So that if I look at that holistically, it could be that our competitors have got a better go-to-market and they're destroying us, so our salespeople are leaving. It could be that that the product is having a huge amount of failing rates, so our customers aren't happy. It could be that the actual right answer for that is, well, we shouldn't even be in this location. We should completely readjust our org strategy and shift to a different local centre or a different location. So although I agree that I can see that the two teams are aligning much closer, I don't necessarily agree that they should even be within HR.
I think there's a middle ground, because I think that one of the things that businesses that are really cute at doing is looking at things like their attrition rate and saying, and how does that tie into lost revenue? So, if we are having a whole bunch of regretted leavers, and they are feeling rubbish about the fact that they've left us, does that then mean that they are no longer consumers of ours? And what's the impact of that? Because that rolls up to $1. And if you can roll anything up to $1 value, the business starts to listen. And then I think you can start to have the conversations that you're talking about, Toby, which is the much broader, bigger business problem. But I think at the moment it feels like it's just still the dots are not being joined. And our job is to make people help them understand how those dots join. What really is the business impact of attrition, not in terms of hiring, not in terms of bums on seats, but in terms of straight dollar value.
Yeah,
I think that's a really fair point.
Yeah, what's the point? The purpose is as an organization to generate revenue, right? So tie your activities and your impact to the most significant goals of the company.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. So, Toby, what's happening in the TI community, particularly the Facebook group?
Yes, there's been two main things that kind of came up in the conversations that I liked this month. One was around, I'm going to go in reverse order from normal, awards, talent intelligence awards. And it's something that we've been discussing for a little while, is what do we do about awards? How do we know what good looks like? And there aren't really any. So I think that's something that the Talent Intel Collective can really look at for 2021. Is that something we want to do? I think if we do it, I'd like to be far more transparent than a lot of award ceremonies out there. I'd like to say anyone that's applying, you're going to have a case study written. I see it really as a learning opportunity for the rest of the community. So if people are winning awards and doing great stuff, that's great, but we all should be understanding why that is, how that is, what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that could be a really good learning opportunity. And then tying into that really in terms of the learning and the benchmarking is around external benchmark metrics for talent intelligence. How do we know what good looks like for talent intelligence? How are we benchmarking against each other? It's something that, once again, we've had conversations about as in various groups. It's something I think we need to look at as a community and say, how do we make this standardized? I think it is hard because there's so much variance between the teams. We've got teams within the community that are very, very people analytics focused. We've got teams that are highly, highly technical data scientists. And then we've got other teams that are highly consultative. So understanding what a benchmark is there could be difficult, but I think it's something we're in a great opportunity at the moment because the industry is at its foundations to really set the standard and say, this is what good looks like, and then build upon it.
Interesting. Particularly on the awards, as somebody who's just spent the last 3 months, it feels like, going through a judging process for some recruitment awards, which were very thorough, robust in terms of the way we judge them. But you're right about the transparency bit externally. We didn't talk much to the world about why people won. We just said these guys won. Whereas we've got all of that information. We were very robust in our methodology. We had key things that people needed to evidence, and we were clear about what that evidence needed to look like from the submissions. But then afterwards, we're not going out going, this is why ABC PLC won, and this is what they delivered. It's just, they were great. So I think that's a really, really good point. And I think more awards should probably follow that. Are you thinking of doing your own, Toby, or trying to convince some of the big awarding organisations that already do them to make sure that talent intelligence is on there? on their list of categories?
I think as a community, we've always kind of tried to do our own thing.
Yeah.
So I think let's do our own. We've tried to shoehorn and look at other categories and other regions we can get into. There are certain award ceremonies you can get in through, like the Innovation Award, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of the HR Analytics, People Analytics awards, it's very hard to convert what we do into that world. So my thought at the moment is if we can't find the right one out there, let's do it ourselves.
Too right. Let's do it. I'm in. I'll join. I'll help.
I'm in. We'll sponsor it. We've already had this conversation on the collective. I've gone, we'll sponsor it. I'm quite up for building out a certification. Kind of different, almost like a course in talent intelligence. And it would be really interesting to kind of tie those two things together. And say, right, okay, what are the kind of base level stuff, and then maturity curve, if you like, for talent intelligence.
Yeah, really
exciting times. Like it. As you say, it's early days, but actually, this is a time to start thinking about this stuff, isn't it?
Vibhu?
I think I was just going to say that I like the idea of having a certification for talent intelligence. Folks that want to start off doing talent intelligence. And I also think that it's a hard to find mix of skills that we need to build these talent intelligence organizations. So I'm also very curious about what your thoughts around what are the sort of skills that we validate through this certificate, right? So I'm curious about that, and also brilliant ideas. I think the awards is a brilliant idea. I'm also curious about the group's thoughts on what could be potential categories that we have for these awards.
Well, I'm just going to chuck out TI Leader of the Year award, and I'm going to win it every year. So tough luck.
And then there's a Legend award waiting for me and Alison as well. Of course. Sadly, collect those.
And then we can have people who do actual work, real work, and impact awards, and that can go to Vibhu. There you are.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna get the podcast host of the year award. There we go. There's one for me. What are you having, Alison? What's your award?
I'm gonna have the Will Sponsor It award. That's it.
Most willing sponsor of the year award. Yeah, I love it. Oh, fantastic. Anyway, listen, guys, I think enough of the general chat and catching up on what's happening in the world. It's as informative as it is. We've got a great guest here. We've got Vibhu sitting, waiting for our questions to be fired at him. So, out of interest, Nick and Alison, this is your time to shine, as they say. Who's playing good cop and who's playing bad cop this week?
Oh, I don't know. I always agree with Nick.
You're both good cops, aren't you? Really?
Let's just be honest about that. We're too soft. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. Let's see where the conversation takes us, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Anyway, over to you guys. I'll let you take over from this point.
Cool. I'm going to go first. Sorry, Nick. That was Vibhu said right at the very beginning of this. He said we do things a bit differently in talent intelligence.
Beat me to it.
Oh, go. I was like, oh, that sounds exciting. What does that mean? So, Vibhu, what does that mean?
Okay. So, I think one of the things that I was handed when I joined this team as a talent intelligence was that we had a lot of terrific folks that looked at talent intelligence as not just a problem of understanding where the markets are moving and what our competitors are doing, but also as a problem of how that affects us, right? And this kind of was very much tightly woven into the DNA of the team. And this team that I'm talking about 4 or 5 years back was building tools, a network of sensors that will help us contextualize market information better, right? We looked at talent intelligence as having 3 pillars to it. One is the pillar of getting the right data in through the door, which is your data, let's call it data sourcing or data accumulation strategy. And then there's this layer of contextualizing all of the data that you've gotten in through the door and reading it, in the business context that Intel operates in. And then the last one was, delivery, which is how do you consult with the business teams and other HR teams and partner with them to get to the you know get to the business impact part of it, right? So the contextualization layer is what I think is special, and that's enabled by a network of sensors that we have to do things like um, you know take in information about what are the various things that our competitors are doing in the external market, both from a talent perspective and product perspective, and archiving it, tagging it, and archiving it in a clean manner that it becomes easier to say what companies are expanding where and for what reason, and how that's connected to their product strategy. Doing things like um, looking at the talent demand information, the job postings at our top competitors, and then using all of that information to infer things like what is the sort of competitive pressure that we would face from these competitors in these locations because of a certain overlap in the degree of, in the type of skills that we are looking for in these markets, right? So I think the contextualization layer is what is special. And in talking to folks from other companies, they do it in different ways. And I think the amount of time and energy that I can barely take any credit for, but are the folks who had been working on the talent intelligence problem within Intel. They've invested a lot of time and energy in building these network of sensors, software products
Whose
that allow
idea
us to
was it?
operate at scale. Uh, to be honest, I think it's old enough to say that we've had a talent intelligence function of sorts for I want to say at least 15 years. It's existed in some form or the other, and over the years, a lot of people have contributed to it. There are folks like Jason Alvey, who's my manager now, who's contributed heavily to it, and then folks like Ricky Ehrman, who's not with Intel anymore, but she's also contributed very heavily to uh, you know to building up this infrastructure. And I think when in the previous episode, Lyndon was talking about the taxonomy, right? Um, as I was listening to it, I was so grateful to the team that handed the taxonomy, a working, proper laid out taxonomy to me back in 2017, right? And they'd always been ahead of the curve in terms of investing a lot of time in that contextualization piece. And I think we're just sitting here reaping the benefits out of it. All of us talent intelligence analysts today, they're reaping a lot of benefits out of the good work that they've done at that point.
So I have a. Oh, sorry, Alison. Go ahead.
No, go on. No. I stole you, Phil. It's okay.
So yes, taxonomy. Love this topic. Vibhu, interested to know how you think about building out the taxonomy and the types of tagging, either aligned kind of horizontally across skill sets, or also thinking about kind of vertical alignments and business priorities, or a combination of both. So how do you think about, like, for example, we would look at silicon and hardware engineers across markets agnostic of companies versus we're looking at these particular, say, silicon competitors and very specific signals around the skills and the product groups and the growth and investments that we're seeing. So if you could share a bit more on kind of the thought process and how that's evolved over time, and maybe how much business influence has around developing this kind of tracking and taxonomy system.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a brilliant question, because this is something that we've always struggled with. We have software engineers that are working on um, products like, let's say, we could have a software engineer working on a product like streaming service, and at the same time we could have a software engineer that's working on a product like uh, um, let's say a social media messaging platform, right? And these two might be very different skills. They might be even using the same technologies and resulting in very different sort of outcomes and products. The In our experience, we've in the past tried to do it as a combination, looking at both sort of skills involved, sort of horizontally, what are the various skills involved, and that I would say is the primary driver of how the taxonomy is defined, with some emphasis on the sort of products that these skills enable, right? Um, uh, there is some amount of product or domain experience that's valued within the semiconductor and hardware industry. So, for instance, if you have design engineers working on graphics products versus design engineers working on CPUs, there is some overlap between the type of skills that they would have, but their experience within their experience of having built those specific products also carries a lot of weightage, and it's significant, and it needs to be measured differently. So um, the skills part of it and taking the horizontal approach is what in our case has been the driver, with um, you know uh, the vertical part of it, which is what domain do they operate in. Also, we try to tag that to some extent.
I think
Got it.
that's so
Yeah,
interesting, isn't it? Because I think
it's so complex.
yeah, it's really complex because the skill works. It works horizontally for the most part, but then there are some skills where you kind of you've got to apply a vertical layer, whether that's life sciences or med tech or another. It's just oil and gas. A mechanical engineer and a pipeline engineer are almost certainly two very different things from a skill set point of view. But I think you've got to also look at the kind of wider business environment, and this is one of the things that we're messing around with in the background is actually, if you take the skill of financial analysis and then you look in the wider business environment and the wider location, the location and the business environment influences what that skill actually is. So if you're a financial analysis in, I don't know, I'm going to chuck it out, Manchester, you probably work for an accountancy firm. But if you've got the skill of financial analysis in the city, in London or in New York, it's probably more linked to investment or broking. Yeah, and so you can't be as broad as the skill of financial analysis and assume that it's going to cross verticals.
Absolutely. And it goes even deeper as well. If you looked at the type of or the focus of financial analysis, you could be in the pre-IPO kind of venture capital world versus obviously publicly traded companies, and there are incredibly different approaches and portfolios that are being looked at and managed. So it's that again is that contextual layer, isn't it? And that business understanding, and then how you translate that to the external market. So 15 years though, Vibhu, of an evolution. So it sounds like we have a lot to learn from your function over at Intel. So what's the future looking like for you? So as you, I guess, continue to develop this taxonomy, where do you see it taking your function, and what advantages are you looking to gain over the next few years?
Mhm. I think that's a brilliant question. I think there are we are working on all the three aspects of what we think makes the talent intelligence a part of a talent intelligence solution. So on the data accumulation or the data sourcing front, we are looking at what are the various, there's so many different data sources that we use today. We are looking at ways to organize it a little bit better, make sure that we have the right sort of infrastructure to have historical data sets about the markets that we operate in. In the contextualization layer, we're looking to, one of the biggest challenges with the taxonomy is keeping it up to date, having it refreshed on a periodic cadence. And that's building the taxonomy is one problem, but maintaining it is, I'd say, an even bigger problem. But that's something that, we need to be constantly working on. And I think a lot of the tools that we have, a lot of the vendors that are operating in this talent intelligence space are starting to bring in this angle of contextualizing the market information better. So, for instance, if today uh, if Nick at Microsoft, Toby at Philips, and Vibhu at Intel all were interested in Java developers in, let's say, South Africa, we'd all see the same talent pool, the exact same talent pool, the exact same sort of talent demand numbers. But uh, the same numbers mean very different things to Nick at Microsoft, Toby at Philips, and me at Intel, right? And this aspect of contextualizing that market information is something that our vendors are beginning to focus on, which also gives us some leeway in terms of modifying the sort of work that we do in the contextualization layer, right? We can now be looking at things like okay, So far, we've had to develop our own sense of what the employer brand strength is that we enjoy in a particular market, and how that plays a role in the talent availability, the the likely yield of talent that we can get from a particular market. So we've had to look at some of those things. So we are looking for um, uh, the evolution of the vendors in this space to help us make a contextualization layer better. And this is where I think it also can start giving us more predictive capabilities. And then on the delivery front, we are looking to make we're always looking to improve things like the way we collaborate, the way we consult with our partners, the way we do stakeholder management, and just this ability of storytelling. I think they are all very key abilities, in becoming a better talent intelligence analyst. And this is something that we're working as a team to kind of um, be better at storytelling, be better at consulting, and so on.
You talked earlier about the importance or the power of combining internal and external data. To what extent do you do that now?
hmm So over the last couple of years, we've had this sort of a merger where people analytics and talent intelligence teams are now more, deeply connected, right? And we've had folks coming in from the people analytics world picking up talent intelligence skills. We have had folks from the talent intelligence world picking up people analytics skills. And now we have analysts who have both the ability to do people analytics and talent intelligence. Right. And that becomes something that's really very powerful. We still have this, we see instances where, someone who started from the people analytics world wears that hat more often than the talent intelligence hat, and the vice versa is also true. But it's definitely creating an impact because it helps us build that more comprehensive picture. Not everything that happens in the organization can be explained by internal factors alone, and not everything can be explained by external factors alone. But when you have this ability to put together both of those factors, you become, as an analyst, you become someone who has like a lot of power, right?
Yeah, and I think back to your example a moment ago, Vibhu, around three different organizations look at the same talent pool, but there's a nuance as to how successful they may be hiring from that pool. And brand equity is part of it, prior success. So that I guess is where you obviously, it's fundamental to have that prior context of how have we hired in this market, because there's lesser known startup with a lesser known brand in a particular market versus a multinational who are well known and expanding, you may have a different measure of success as you start to obviously source from that pool. So it's really, really fundamental. Vibhu, I'm fascinated to know, just switching gears slightly, you came from sales and revenue forecasting. So you've kind of sat on the business side, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, this convergence of kind of business intelligence, people analytics, and TI. What lessons have you learned or taken from your previous experience in that world that have become distinct strengths, would you say, as you've migrated into talent intelligence?
Okay, so I've done a little bit of supply chain analytics. I've done a little bit of sales analytics, and I've done a little bit of product marketing and marketing analytics as well. So there are things that I draw from all of these various experiences that are useful to me today in my role. And I really like talent intelligence and people analytics as a field and as a data set to be analyzing and to be working on, providing solutions around, right? So there's always small things starting from, in sales analytics, in the world of sales analytics, you do things like understanding the opportunities that you have in your sales pipeline and modeling and figuring out how that turns into revenue, right? In the same, you can use the exact same concept to model your diversity pipeline and try to understand and get a sense for what would be your gender representation a few years down the line, given how you have built your pipeline and the sort of your sales stages are kind of parallel to the hiring stages that you have within your hiring process. And the more you think about it, the more you start seeing the similarities between the two worlds, and you're able to apply. Of course, the same techniques don't work, but the same overall concepts do work, and you're able to see draw some inferences from there. And one of the things that I've realized is the more actively I think about it, the more time that I spend, uh, thinking about how do I draw parallels, the more value I get out of it. Because at times I just keep doing these things, personally. It's always helped me to kind of um spend dedicated time thinking about what can I draw from my previous experiences. And I think this is applicable for people in all sorts of different roles coming into talent intelligence roles, because all of their previous roles, I think, certainly has some influence in the way that they could do talent intelligence work and how they could do it better. So the most time I spend thinking about it, the more I can draw from there. This is what has been my experience.
I think our listeners who are looking to grow... Oh, sorry, Alison. I was just going to say, we just opened up an entirely new talent pool, didn't we, for the future growth of TI? I think, Vibhu, that's a strong statement of, yeah, exactly, the really good examples of how kind of sales analytics and forecasting can be valuable in our world. But sorry, over to you, Alison.
I think that I'm going to agree with you, Nick, but there's something about actually people who come from a business background into this world look at it in a completely different way, and Vibhu just talked exactly about that, that using sales analytics and you look at the data to solve a problem and a challenge rather than looking at the data through one lens. And what I'd be really interested to understand is how that translates, Vibhu, into how you're measuring the success of the function. Is it a dollar value or other KPIs?
Again, so I think that's a really good question. It's something that we have had a lot of thought and a lot of time spent thinking about how do we measure the success of talent intelligence within the company. We have used metrics like, in how many instances have we identified talent opportunities or talent threats with enough of reacting time, right? Not too close to when if we don't, so that we don't miss the wagon on a talent opportunity, or we identify a talent threat that's too close that we're not able to react, right? So where do we have what are the number of opportunities and threats that we spotted? That used to be one of the metrics that we had. The number of people that we have helped hire through the decisions that we make, the type of investments that Intel is making based off of our recommendations. So these used to be the sort of metrics. And at the same time, we've also looked at things like, out of the number of recommendations that we make, how many got accepted. All of these metrics have some pros and some cons to them. And we are constantly looking for more ideas, more concepts around how do we measure effectiveness of TI.
But it's really interesting because all of the things that you talk about are linked to the fact that your talent intelligence is influencing business decisions, which I think is fascinating. And that's what happens when you add that contextual layer, right? And you start to look at it in eyes that aren't about how do we get better bums on seats more quickly. It's just a different lens, which I think is fascinating.
I think just on that bums on seats piece, and I know this isn't my section, I'm totally jumping in, so I do apologise. But I think there is still an overlay of... My opinion's slightly changing on this in life, and I think there is a place for more, what I'd consider more talent analytics, so talent acquisition analytics, so looking at the number of placements impacted, etc. But I think it's, to the point I think Vibhu made earlier, is contextualising that number back into a business number. So not a number of placements or a time to fill number of days, but what's the revenue that would have needed to have been generated to affect the profitability by having those people in earlier? It's contextualizing that back to a business piece rather than keeping it as a TA metric.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. And you said it much more coherently than me. Vibhu, have you done anything that looks at what is the impact of the skills that Intel generates on the local economies that you operate in?
We have done some work around this space, and there's something that is unique about Intel in the way we have invested in countries and locations in the past. We've gone into in the 1970s, we started our first semiconductor manufacturing factory in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, and we still have that site, and it's a very significant site for us. And the sort of investment that we made there as a first mover provided us a lot of advantages that I think we still enjoy today, and has in turn contributed heavily to the sort of local economy. And the same is something that we've done with locations like Folsom in California, where we have a very strong presence in uh, that part of California. The same is true for Intel in Costa Rica, where we are a significant player in the Costa Rican local economy, right? So we've had in the locations that we have operated, um, mm, we've made significant investments and we've had impacts on the economies there. And it's something that I wouldn't say that we, as a talent intelligence and people analytics team, do a lot of thought around. But I'm curious to kind of understand from your standpoint where you think, spending more time thinking about the impact that we've had on local economies in turn helps the business. So how do you think that kind of works?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one. So this kind of plays off the back of the Tesla Gigafactory that we were talking about with Lyndon. Is the wider factors that influence location decisions, and you've talked about it a little bit then in terms of particularly Costa Rica and your first investments. I'm kind of looking at this really big hat at the moment and going, okay, if I looked just through a UK lens, but this is relevant across most countries. What COVID has done is massively accelerated digital transformation, right? And that means that there's an increased demand for digital skills than there was before, and everybody is after exactly the same skills. So it's kind of just accelerated a trend we all knew was coming. And I just think there's something about saying, what does that mean for the local economy? What does that mean for the country? What does that mean in terms of political influence that you could have? What does that mean in terms of reskilling? I think there's all sorts of different lenses that I think are quite interesting.
Absolutely, Alison. I think if you look at a lot of the larger employers, when they set up new facilities or invest in particular geos, you'll often see that there's a partnership with local government or other education providers to focus on skilling initiatives. And I think in part they have a moral responsibility to do that, right? So if you're going to go and you're going to upend that economy and obviously place a lot of potentially high paid jobs, highly skilled workers, how do you influence the future pipeline? How do you really make it a sustainable investment in the people there? And you'll see a lot of that. And I think it's absolutely necessary. But I think where it's getting challenging, to your point now, Alison, is the distribution, right? The pandemic has kind of forced organizations to look at, like, what is a future footprint? What is a future facility? What does a hub versus a campus look like, etc.? We've talked about this in previous episodes, but that's the part where it starts to get more challenging, because it's less pinned to very specific geos and more to talent pools holistically across maybe a country, for example.
Yeah. I think it's a really cool space. Vibhu, can I ask a question, which I don't think we ask every series, and I think we should do. What is the one thing that you wish that you had learned earlier and applied earlier?
Ooh, good question.
Okay. So I think, let me think here for a moment. The one thing that as an area, as a use case for talent intelligence, that I wish we did better is actually M&A strategy and playing a role there. And this kind of also makes me think about what is the sort of one thing that we did differently to begin with, right? And that might be in the realm of collaborating more often with groups like M&A strategy or corporate strategy, because of the kind of data that we work with, and where we already have strong connections, and there's a lot to work on. With the stakeholders that we're currently working with, we oftentimes have this blind spot in terms of working with other stakeholders, other partners in the organization. So I'd say looking for more people within the organization with whom we can partner with is certainly something that I wish we had kind of I personally had done earlier in my role, and that's certainly there's a lot to reap from that, from partnering with people that we would normally not think of as direct stakeholders that um, we have in the talent intelligence world.
That's so cool. I almost love you, Vibhu, for that response. We have literally this week put onto the Stratagens website, not onto the platform, but onto the website, an infographic about joining the dots, and you click on a business problem and it shows you all of the different people and stakeholders within an organization that could or should be involved in that business problem, and all of the different data points, because that's where the power of that collaboration comes in. And I just, I'm completely with you, whether it's M&A strategy or whether it's actually where do we grow our business. I think engaging all of the stakeholders early on in the process means you get
Absolutely.
a more powerful result.
And guys, I know I say this every episode, and it's because we have such amazing guests. We genuinely could chat to you, Vibhu, forever. Amazing stuff. But I am mindful of time. We've just hit the hour, and if we're not careful, we're increasing each episode by 5 minutes. So by the time we get to the end of next year, we'll be running at podcast episodes that are approaching 2.5 hours long if we're not very careful.
I'll need a wee if we run that long.
Exactly. I'm going to go for it now. I'm going to say we have got to stop at some point, and I'm going to call it. I'm going to say that point is now. Your expression of love for Vibhu, Alison, I think that's a good cut-off point. So I think we can crack on. I wanted to, as always, thanks everybody, Alison, Nick, Toby, for co-hosting. This is now our 6th Talent Intelligence podcast episode. We've managed 6. I think that's incredible. Well, actually, we forgot our little friend at the very beginning. There we go. Yay! Vibhu, massive thanks to you. You've been brilliant. I could have sat listening to you for hours, literally. I was, I zoned out of everything other than listening to you telling us about your experience. I muted myself, and I realised what time it was. I thought I better step in. To our listeners, as ever, a huge thanks for listening. We've got through the last 6 months with your support. It's been fabulous, and keep giving us that. Please do. It's what keeps us going. And if you get a chance, a little review on Apple Podcasts would be really appreciated. Anything you do to support us now or in the future, huge. Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year, depending on when you're listening to this. Kind of mute out the wrong bit, but either way, cheers to everybody. And as ever, my usual sign-off, stay intelligent, folks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for
Thanks,
now.
everyone. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I wanted for the last time to remind you about our generous sponsor, Stratagens. Here's that posh chap again, telling you about their fabulous product.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's STRATIGENS.com. to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.